bottom line is most client briefs we get are very restrictive, right? They immediately say this is a media brief or this is a creative brief, okay? The reality is that for our point of view, is that all briefs should start from the point of view of what we're trying to achieve, okay? Then comes what's the big idea, and then worry about how you execute it. Then worry about, should we be on homepages of MSN? Should we be a big microsite or a viral campaign? If you combine those two ideas and say, let's just create a great idea and then work out if the best solution is media or creative, you get a far better solution. Our industry at the moment is separated out, okay? And as soon as you separate out the media and the creative, you're always going to get a far more linear and arguably less creative solution than if you start from a platform of, let's just think of a great idea and work out how we execute it afterwards. Most agency structures since the 80s have been built around media only or creative only. Right? If you ask almost any one of the people you're probably interviewing over the next couple of days, they will probably argue to you privately that actually media and creative should always be joined. It doesn't make sense to have media planning over here and then the creative message you're going to put on those media websites in a different place. But the way that the economic model, whether it's WBP or Omnicom or Publicis, has been created, it's gone down this route of separate media, separate creative, and of course, it's for the client and agencies to try and work together. But there's nothing better than having a media planner sitting right next to a creative person, just asking basic questions. Where's my creative going to sit? It comes down to the economic model, or it comes down to the way the big groups are structured. Okay? To try and get the merger of big media agencies now with big creative agencies, it would be a logistical nightmare, and it's also a cultural nightmare. Okay? For us, it's very easy because at Profero, it's in our DNA. From day one, we have that. If you imagine if you walk in a Mediacom or a Carrot type office, it's very different to that of a Saatchi & Saatchi or Glue type environment. They're two completely different almost species or different individuals. And to try and get those two groups to work very closely together means you need to completely rip apart the model and start it again from scratch. Also, let's face it, clients' contracts quite often are structured that way. So they would need to renegotiate every client contract to think differently. And we'd argue, unless you really start from a basis of that from the start, it's very difficult to replicate. But how we really got to do it in the first place, we didn't know any better, if I'll be honest. When Dale and I started the business, way back 9 years ago now, it just made common sense to us. So we didn't come from a traditional advertising background and saying, that's the way we need to replicate, let's take the old model and make it digital. We just came from the point of view, what makes common sense? And so for us, it was very logical. I'd like to say it was a fantastic insight that we had 9 years ago, but it was just the way that made common sense to us. From a client perspective, once you talk to them, it makes complete sense to them. Why would you have your media not talking very closely to your creative and the two being planned at the same time? It doesn't make any sense for the media agency to go off here, the creative agency to go off here, and hopefully come back together with a perfect loop. And so most clients completely get it, and interestingly, we've seen more full service briefs probably in the last 6 to 9 months than we have seen in the last 5 to 6 years. Because I think clients are suddenly getting it, and that's what they're demanding from their agencies and from their partners. The other one is, I think we have this habit of picking up very hard social challenges, such as, a lot of people know us for the last Cyber Lion, which was the child protection. So how do you get kids to be more aware of paedophiles online? Very challenging. This one was the second one in the similar kind of vein, is how do you make kids aware of the dangers of drugs, and actually try and influence their behaviour about drugs. And the particular brief was about cannabis. Now everyone, and I suppose most people around the swimming pool or in the agency environment, probably at some point actually tried cannabis, and hopefully most of us are still okay and we haven't been too badly damaged. So it's an extra challenge of saying, well, how do we actually make people more aware about the dangers of drugs? How do you make them more aware of the dangers of cannabis, without lecturing to them, without just doing the Just Say No campaign, or without sounding like your mother, or your father? So where we started from was a lot of detailed consumer research and insight, and the one metric that came out more than anything else was about kids have this fear that maybe there's long-term damage to their brain. They don't care about what they're going to do this weekend or how they're going to feel on Monday, but in the back of their mind there's a little bit of danger of saying, well, actually, what's the potential long-term damage? So we came this whole idea about, Frank, talk to Frank, because drugs potentially can mess with your brain long-term. And so the idea is basically a kid sitting on the chair, taking a hit of drugs. And what's interesting about the interactive side is the TV commercial for it would have been a linear experience. But here you actually get the chance to give the kid a hit, right? So you click on him, he takes a draw, he starts smoking, and basically his brain pops open and you see his brain start spinning around. The more you give him a hit, the more his brain spins, the more smoke comes up, until eventually it pops out of his head and just asks the question, no, do you know enough about drugs? Do you believe that no, drugs could be messing with your mind? And I think the reason why it's probably got shortlisted is that it was the first time we managed to persuade the government, the UK government, to use really high production values. So we use RSA films, so we actually use almost TV-style production values in online executions. Now, to date, a lot of the online ads you've been seeing or creative you've been seeing has been quite amateurish. It's been someone with a webcam, trying to get by to do a great job, and amazing things have been done. This was the first time the UK government used real high TV-style production quality for an online ad. But rather than just saying, well, let's create a TV commercial for online, let's create an interactive, basically advertisement, but using TV quality production. And I think that's why it's got shortlisted. Strong creative idea, followed by great production values. Why has this created a big impact? What has ultimately made it change people's perceptions? Okay? I think it's a combination of things, right? Yes, there's clever media placements, right? So yes, it is in the environment that basically the 14 to 18-year-olds are hanging out. But more importantly, I think it's the fact that we're not lecturing them. We're not telling them to not take drugs. We're not shouting at them. We're not having a one-way conversation. We're actually encouraging them to basically take part. And we've learned from all the things we do, if we allow people to interact with the advertising, they'll learn more. There's a great thing from Confucius that says, no, if you tell me, I'll forget. If you show me, I'll remember. If you engage with me, I'll remember forever. And that's what it's about. It's about engaging with people, letting them interact, letting them be part of the advertising, yeah, and teasing them. Let them do more, and they tend to remember far more about it. And you can't do that in offline channels. You can't do that on TV. You can't do that on radio. You can't do that on outdoor. I think there's some great experimental or sort of engaging websites work being done, okay? And there's some great stuff coming out of Sweden, like some of the work that Farfar's done with basically their big pocket campaign for Nokia. I would love to see that kind of entry really being showcased and being highlighted. Because actually what it's showing is actually the online medium is changing as a channel. Now it's becoming far more an entertainment channel. So what we've seen in the past is the restrictions by the nature of medium of 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds TV commercials. What the channel is now becoming with broadband is the ability, if someone's interested in your product, to be able to talk to them for 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes, 2 days, 4 days, or even like a month if you really want to. And that's because basically we're able to tell a far richer story. We're not being restricted by a very small canvas. We're being restricted by our imagination. And I think like the Nokia work is a good example of a big idea that's really kind of sort of maximizing the canvas that we have in this digital platform.